How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 8. Pitfalls to Avoid. Common Stumbling Blocks, Peculiar Constructions, and Misused Forms. Attraction. Very often the verb is separated from its real nominative or subject by several intervening words, and in such cases one is liable to make the verb agree with the subject nearest to it. Here are a few examples, showing that the leading writers now and then take a tumble into this pitfall. Quote, "The partition which the two ministers made of the powers of government were singularly happy." Unquote. Macaulay. Were should be was to agree with its subject partition. Quote, "One at least of the qualities which fit it for training ordinary men, unfit it for training an extraordinary man." Unquote. Bagahot. Unfit should be unfits to agree with the subject one. Quote, "The Tibetans have engaged to exclude from their country those dangerous influences whose appearance were the chief cause of our action." Unquote. The Times. Were should be was to agree with appearance. Quote, "An immense amount of confusion and indifference prevail in these days." Unquote. The Telegraph. Prevail should be prevails to agree with amount. Ellipsis. Errors in ellipsis occur chiefly with prepositions. His objection and condoning of the boy's course seemed, to say the least, paradoxical. The preposition to should come after objection. Many men of brilliant parts are crushed by force of circumstances, and their genius forever lost to the world. Some maintain that the missing verb after genius is are, but such is ungrammatical. In such cases the right verb should be always expressed as "their genius is forever lost to the world." The split infinitive. Even the best speakers and writers are in the habit of placing a modifying word or words between the to and the remaining part of the infinitive. It is possible that such will come to be looked upon in time as the proper form, but at present the splitting of the infinitive is decidedly wrong. He was scarcely able to even talk. She commenced to rapidly walk around the room. To have really loved is better than not to have at all loved. In these constructions it is much better not to split the infinitive. In everyday speech the best speakers sin against this observance. In New York City there is a certain magistrate, a member of the 400, who prides himself on his diction in language. He tells this story. A prisoner, a faded, battered specimen of mankind, on whose haggard face, deeply lined with the marks of dissipation, there still lingered faint reminders of better days long past, stood dejected before the judge. "Where are you from?" asked the magistrate. "From Boston," answered the accused. "Indeed," said the judge, "indeed yours is a sad case. And yet you don't seem to thoroughly realize how low you have sunk." The man stared as if struck. "Your Honour does me an injustice," he said bitterly. "The disgrace of arrest for drunkenness, the mortification of being thrust into a noisome dungeon, the publicity and humiliation of trial in a crowded and dingy courtroom I can bear, but to be sentenced by a police magistrate who splits his infinitives, that is indeed the last blow." 1. The indefinite adjective pronoun one, when put in place of a personal substantive, is liable to raise confusion. When a sentence or expression is begun with the impersonal one, the word must be used throughout in all references to the subject. Thus, one must mind one's own business if one wishes to succeed. It may seem prolix and awkward, nevertheless it is the proper form. You must not say, one must mind his business if he wishes to succeed, for the subject is impersonal, and therefore cannot exclusively take the masculine pronoun. With anyone, it is different. You may say, if anyone sins, he should acknowledge it. Let him not try to hide it by another sin. Only. This is a word that is a pitfall to the most of us, whether learned or unlearned. Probably it is the most indiscriminately used word in the language. From the different positions it is made to occupy in a sentence, it can relatively change the meaning. For instance, in the sentence, I only struck him that time, the meaning to be inferred is that the only thing I did to him was to strike him, not kick or otherwise abuse him. But if the only is shifted, so as to make the sentence read, I struck him only that time, the meaning conveyed is that only on that occasion and at no other time did I strike him. If another shift is made to I struck only him that time, the meaning is again altered so that it signifies he was the only person I struck. In speaking, we can by emphasis impress our meaning on our hearers, but in writing we have nothing to depend upon but the position of the word in the sentence. The best rule in regard to only is to place it immediately before the word or phrase it modifies or limits. Alone. Alone is another word which creates ambiguity and alters meaning. If we substitute it for only in the preceding example, the meaning of the sentence will depend upon the arrangement. Thus, I alone struck him at that time signifies that I and no other struck him. When the sentence reads, I struck him alone at that time, it must be interpreted that he was the only person that received a blow. Again, if it is made to read, I struck him at that time alone, the sense conveyed is that that was the only occasion on which I struck him. The rule which governs the correct use of only is also applicable to alone. Other and another. These are words which often give to expressions a meaning far from that intended. Thus, I have nothing to do with that other rascal across the street certainly means that I am a rascal myself. I sent the dispatch to my friend, but another villain intercepted it, clearly signifies that my friend is a villain. A good plan is to omit these words when they can be readily done without, as in the above examples, but when it is necessary to use them, make your meaning clear. You can do this by making each sentence or phrase in which they occur independent of contextual aid. And with the relative. Never use and with the relative in this manner. That is the dog I meant, and which I know is of pure breed. This is an error quite common. The use of and is permissible when there is a parallel relative in the preceding sentence or clause. Thus, there is the dog which I meant, and which I know is of pure breed, is quite correct. Loose participles. A participle or participial phrase is naturally referred to the nearest nominative. If only one nominative is expressed, it claims all the participles that are not by the construction of the sentence otherwise fixed. John, working in the field all day and getting thirsty, drank from the running stream. Here the participles working and getting clearly refer to John. But in the sentence, swept along by the mob, I could not save him, the participle, as it were, is lying around loose and may be taken to refer to either the person speaking or to the person spoken about. It may mean that I was swept along by the mob, or the individual whom I tried to save was swept along. Going into the store, the roof fell can be taken that it was the roof which was going into the store when it fell. Of course, the meaning intended is that some person or persons were going into the store just as the roof fell. In all sentence construction with participles, there should be such clearness as to preclude all possibility of ambiguity. The participle should be so placed that there can be no doubt as to the noun to which it refers. Often it is advisable to supply such words as will make the meaning obvious. Broken construction. Sometimes the beginning of a sentence presents quite a different grammatical construction from its end. This arises from the fact probably that the beginning is lost sight of before the end is reached. This occurs frequently in long sentences. Thus, honesty, integrity, and square dealing will bring anybody much better through life than the absence of either. Here the construction is broken at than. The use of either, only used in referring to one of two, shows that the fact is forgotten that three qualities and not two are under consideration. Any one of the three meanings might be intended in the sentence, viz., absence of any one quality, absence of any two of the qualities, or absence of the whole three qualities. Either denotes one or the other of two, and should never be applied to any one of more than two. When we fall into the error of constructing such sentences as above, we should take them apart and reconstruct them in a different grammatical form. Thus, honesty, integrity, and square dealing will bring a man much better through life than a lack of these qualities, which are almost essential to success. Double negative. It must be remembered that two negatives in the English language destroy each other and are equivalent to an affirmative. Thus, I don't know nothing about it is intended to convey that I am ignorant of the matter under consideration, but it defeats its own purpose, inasmuch as the use of nothing implies that I know something about it. The sentence should read, I don't know anything about it. Often we hear such expressions as, he was not asked to give no opinion, expressing the very opposite of what is intended. This sentence implies that he was asked to give his opinion. The double negative, therefore, should be carefully avoided, for it is insidious and is liable to slip in, and the writer remain unconscious of its presence until the eye of the critic detects it. First personal pronoun. The use of the first personal pronoun should be avoided as much as possible in composition. Don't introduce it by way of apology, and never use such expressions as, in my opinion, as far as I can see, it appears to me, I believe, etc. In what you write, the whole composition is expressive of your views, since you are the author. Therefore, there is no necessity for you to accentuate or emphasize yourself at certain portions of it. Moreover, the big I's savor of egotism. Steer clear of them as far as you can. The only place where the first person is permissible is in passages where you are stating a view that is not generally held and which is likely to meet with opposition. Sequence of tenses. When two verbs depend on each other, Their tenses must have a definite relation to each other. "I shall have the pleasure in accepting your kind invitation" is wrong, unless you really mean that just now you decline, though by and by you intend to accept. Or unless you mean that you do accept now, though you have no pleasure in doing so, but look forward to be more pleased by and by. In fact, the sequence of the compound tenses puzzles experienced writers. The best plan is to go back in thought to the time in question and use the tense you would then naturally use. Now in the sentence, "I should have liked to have gone to see the circus," the way to find out the proper sequence is to ask yourself the question, "What is it I should have liked to do?" And the plain answer is, to go to see the circus. I cannot answer, "to have gone to see the circus," for that would imply that at a certain moment I would have liked to be in the position of having gone to the circus. But I do not mean this. I mean that at the moment at which I am speaking, I wish I had gone to see the circus. The verbal phrase "I should have liked" carries me back to the time when there was a chance of seeing the circus, and once back at the time, the going to the circus is a thing of the present. This whole explanation resolves itself into the simple question, "What should I have liked at that time?" And the answer is, to go to see the circus. Therefore this is the proper sequence, and the expression should be, "I should have liked to go to see the circus." If we wish to speak of something relating to a time prior to that indicated in the past tense, we must use the perfect tense of the infinitive, as, "He appeared to have seen better days." We should say, "I expected to meet him," not "I expected to have met him." We intended to visit you, not to have visited you. I hoped they would arrive, not I hoped they would have arrived. I thought I should catch the bird, not I thought I should have caught the bird. I had intended to go to the meeting, not I had intended to have gone to the meeting. Between, among. These prepositions are often carelessly interchanged. Between has reference to two objects only, among to more than two. "The money was equally divided between them" is right when there are only two, but if there are more than two, it should be, "The money was equally divided among them." Less, fewer. Less refers to quantity, fewer to number. "No man has less virtues" should be, "No man has fewer virtues." "The farmer had some oats and a fewer quantity of wheat" should be, "The farmer had some oats and a less quantity of wheat." Further, farther. Further is commonly used to denote quantity, farther to denote distance. "I have walked farther than you." "I need no further supply" are correct. Each other, one another. Each other refers to two, one another to more than two. "Jones and Smith quarrelled, they struck each other" is correct. "Jones, Smith and Brown quarrelled, they struck one another" is also correct. Don't say, "The two boys teach one another," or "The three girls love each other." Each, every, either, neither. These words are continually misapplied. Each can be applied to two or any higher number of objects to signify every one of the number independently. Every requires more than two to be spoken of, and denotes all the persons or things taken separately. Either denotes one or the other of two, and should not be used to include both. Neither is the negative of either, denoting not the other and not the one, and relating to two persons or things considered separately. The following examples illustrate the correct usage of these words. Each man of the crew received a reward. Every man in the regiment displayed bravery. We can walk on either side of the street. Neither of the two is to blame. Neither nor. When two singular subjects are connected by neither nor, use a singular verb, as neither John nor James was there, not were there. None. Custom has sanctioned the use of this word both with the singular and plural, as none is so blind as he who will not see, and none are so blind as they who will not see. However, as it is a contraction of no one, it is better to use the singular verb. Rise, raise. These verbs are very often confounded. Rise is to move or pass upward in any manner, as to rise from bed, to increase in value, to improve in position or rank, as stocks rise, politicians rise, they have risen to honour. Raise is to lift up, to exalt, to enhance, as I raise the table, he raised his servant, the baker raised the price of bread. Lay, lie. The transitive verb lay and lay, the past tense of the neuter verb lie, are often confounded, though quite different in meaning. The neuter verb to lie, meaning to lie down or rest, cannot take the objective after it, except with a preposition. We can say, he lies on the ground, but we cannot say, he lies the ground, since the verb is neuter and intransitive, and as such cannot have a direct object. With lay it is different. Lay is a transitive verb, therefore it takes a direct object after it, as I lay a wager, I laid the carpet, etc. Of a carpet or any inanimate subject we should say, it lies on the floor. A knife lies on the table, not lays. But of a person we say, he lays the knife on the table, not he lies. Lay being the past tense of the neuter to lie, down, we should say, he lay on the bed, and lain being its past participle, we must also say, he has lain on the bed. We can say, I lay myself down, he laid himself down, and such expressions. It is imperative to remember in using these verbs that to lay means to do something, and to lie means to be in a state of rest. Says I said. Says I is a vulgarism. Don't use it. I said is the correct form. In, into. Be careful to distinguish the meaning of these two little prepositions and don't interchange them. Don't say, he went in the room, nor my brother is into the navy. In denotes the place where a person or thing, whether at rest or in motion, is present, and into denotes entrance. He went into the room, my brother is in the navy, are correct. Eat, ate. Don't confound the two. Eat is present, ate is past. I eat the bread means that I am continuing the eating. I ate the bread means that the act of eating is past. Eaten is the perfect participle, but often eat is used instead, and as it has the same pronunciation of et, care should be taken to distinguish the past tense, I ate, from the perfect, I have eaten. Sequence of person. Remember that the first person takes precedence of the second, and the second takes precedence of the third. When Cardinal Wolsey said, ego et rex, I and the king, he showed he was a good grammarian, but a bad courtier. Am come, have come. I am come points to my being here, while I have come intimates that I have just arrived. When the subject is not a person, the verb to be should be used in preference to the verb to have, as the box is come instead of the box has come. Past tense, past participle. The interchange of these two parts of the irregular or so-called strong verbs is, perhaps, the breach oftenest committed by careless speakers and writers. To avoid mistakes, it is requisite to know the principal parts of these verbs, and this knowledge is very easy of acquirement, as there are not more than a couple of hundred of such verbs, and of this number but a small part is in daily use. Here are some of the most common blunders. I seen for I saw. I done it for I did it. I drunk for I drank. I begun for I began. I rung for I rang. I run for I ran. I sung for I sang. I have chose for I have chosen. I have drove for I have driven. I have wore for I have worn. I have trod for I have trodden. I have shook for I have shaken. I have fell for I have fallen. I have drank for I have drunk. I have began for I have begun. I have rang for I have rung. I have rose for I have risen. I have spoke for I have spoken. I have broke for I have broken. It has froze for it has frozen. It has blowed for it has blown. It has flowed of a bird for it has flown. N.B. The past tense and past participle of to hang is hanged or hung. When you are talking about a man meeting death on the gallows, say, he was hanged. When you are talking about the carcass of an animal, say, it was hung, as the beef was hung dry. Also say your coat was hung on a hook. Prepositions and the objective case. Don't forget that prepositions always take the objective case. Don't say, between you and I, say, between you and me. Two prepositions should not govern one objective, unless there is an immediate connection between them. He was refused admission to and forcibly ejected from the school should be, he was refused admission to the school and forcibly ejected from it. Summon, summons. Don't say, I shall summons him, but I shall summon him. Summon is a verb, summons a noun. It is correct to say, I shall get a summons for him, but not a summon. Undeniable, unexceptionable. My brother has an undeniable character is wrong if I wish to convey the idea that he has a good character. The expression should be in that case, my brother has an unexceptionable character. An undeniable character is a character that cannot be denied, whether good or bad. An unexceptionable character is one to which no one can take exception. The pronouns. Very many mistakes occur in the use of the pronouns. Let you and I go should be let you and me go. Let them and we go should be let them and us go. The verb let is transitive and therefore takes the objective case. Give me them flowers should be give me those flowers. I mean them three should be I mean those three. Them is the objective case of the personal pronoun and cannot be used adjectively like the demonstrative adjective pronoun. I am as strong as him should be I am as strong as he. I am younger than her should be I am younger than she. He can write better than me should be he can write better than I. For in these examples the objective cases him, her and me are used wrongfully for the nominatives. After each of the misapplied pronouns a verb is understood, of which each pronoun is the subject. Thus, I am as strong as he is. I am younger than she is. He can write better than I can. Don't say, it is me, say, it is I. The verb to be, of which is a part, takes the same case after it that it has before it. This holds good in all situations as well as with pronouns. The verb to be also requires the pronouns joined to it to be in the same case as a pronoun asking a question. The nominative I requires the nominative who, and the objectives me, him, her, its, you and them require the objective whom. Whom do you think I am should be who do you think I am, and who do they suppose me to be should be whom do they suppose me to be. The objective form of the relative should be always used in connection with a preposition. Who do you take me for should be whom do, etc. Who did you give the apple to should be whom did you give the apple to. But as pointed out elsewhere, the preposition should never end a sentence. Therefore, it is better to say, to whom did you give the apple? After transitive verbs, always use the objective cases of the pronouns. For he and they we have seen, say him and them we have seen. That for so. The hurt, it was that painful it made me cry. Say, so painful. These, those. Don't say, these kind, those sort. Kind and sort are each singular and require the singular pronouns this and that. In connection with these demonstrative adjective pronouns, remember that this and these refer to what is near at hand, that and those to what is more distant, as this book near me, that book over there, these boys near, those boys at a distance. This much, thus much. This much is certain should be thus much, or so much is certain. Flee, fly. These are two separate verbs and must not be interchanged. The principal parts of flee are flee, fled, fled. Those of fly are fly, flew, flown. To flee is generally used in the meaning of getting out of danger. To fly means to soar as a bird. To say of a man, he has flown from the place, is wrong. It should be, he has fled from the place. We can say with propriety that a bird has flown from the place. through, throughout. Don't say, he is well known through the land, but he is well known throughout the land. Vocation and avocation. Don't mistake these two words so nearly alike. Vocation is the employment, business or profession one follows for a living. Avocation is some pursuit or occupation which diverts the person from such employment, business or profession. Thus, his vocation was the law, his avocation farming. Was, were. In the subjunctive mood, the plural form were should be used with a singular subject, as if I were, not was. Remember, the plural form of the personal pronoun you always takes were, though it may denote but one. Thus, you were, never you was. If I was him is a very common expression. Note the two mistakes in it, that of the verb implying a condition and that of the objective case of the pronoun. It should read, if I were he. This is another illustration of the rule regarding the verb to be, taking the same case after it as before it. Were is part of the verb to be. Therefore, as the nominative I goes before it, the nominative he should come after it. A or an. A becomes an before a vowel or before h mute for the sake of euphony or agreeable sound to the ear. An apple, an orange, an heir, an honour, etc. End of chapter 8.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andrew LeBrun, Boston, Massachusetts. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Delvin. Chapter 9. Style. Diction, purity, propriety, precision. It is the object of every writer to put his thoughts into as effective form as possible, so as to make a good impression on the reader. A person may have noble thoughts and ideas, but be unable to express them in such a way as to appeal to others. Consequently, he cannot exert the full force of his intellectuality, nor leave the imprint of his character upon his time, whereas many a man, but indifferently gifted, may wield such a facile pen as to attract attention and win for himself an envious place among his contemporaries. In everyday life, one sees illustrations of men of excellent mentality being cast aside, and ones of mediocre, or in some cases little if any ability, chosen to fill important places. The former are unable to impress their personality. They have great thoughts, great ideas, but these thoughts and ideas are locked up in their brains, and are like prisoners behind the bars, struggling to get free. The key of language which would open the door is wanting, hence they have to remain locked up. Many a man has to pass through the world unheard of, and of little benefit to it, or himself, simply because he cannot bring out what is in him and make it subservient to his will. It is the duty of everyone to develop his best, not only for the benefit of himself, but for the good of his fellow men. It is not at all necessary to have great learning or acquirements. The laborer is as useful in his own place as the philosopher in his. Nor is it necessary to have many talents. One talent, rightly used, is much better than 10 wrongly used. Often a man can do more with 1 than his contemporary can do with 10. Often a man can make $1 go farther than 20 in the hands of his neighbor. Often the poor man lives more comfortably than the millionaire. All depends on the individual himself. If he make right use of what the Creator has given him, and live according to the laws of God and nature, he is fulfilling his allotted place in the universal scheme of creation. In other words, when he does his best, he is living up to the standard of a useful manhood. Now, in order to do his best, a man of ordinary intelligence and education should be able to express himself correctly, both in speaking and in writing. That is, he should be able to convey his thoughts in an intelligent manner which the simplest can understand. The manner in which a speaker or writer conveys his thoughts is known as his style. In other words, style may be defined as the peculiar manner in which a man expresses his conceptions through the medium of language. It depends upon the choice of words and their arrangement to convey a meaning. Scarcely any two writers have exactly the same style, that is to say, express their ideas after the same peculiar form, just as no two mortals are fashioned by nature in the same mold, so that one is an exact counterpart of the other. Just as men differ in the accent and tones of their voices, so do they differ in the construction of their language. Two reporters sent out on the same mission, say to report a fire, will verbally differ in their accounts, though materially both descriptions will be the same as far as the leading facts are concerned. One will express himself in a style different from the other. If you are asked to describe the dancing of a red-haired lady at the last charity ball, you can either say, "The ruby Circe, with the Titan locks glowing like the oriflamme which surrounds the golden god of day as he sinks to rest amid the crimson glory of the burnished west, gave a divine exhibition of the terpsichorean art, which thrilled the souls of the multitude." Or you can simply say, "The red-haired lady danced very well and pleased the audience." The former is a specimen of the ultra-florid or bombastic style, which may be said to depend upon the pomposity of verbosity for its effect. The latter is a specimen of simple natural style. Needless to say, it is to be preferred. The other should be avoided. It stamps the writer as a person of shallowness, ignorance, and inexperience. It has been eliminated from the newspapers. Even the most flatulent of yellow sheets no longer tolerate it in their columns. Affectation and pedantry in style are now universally condemned. It is the duty of every speaker and writer to labor after a pleasing style. It gains him an entrance where he would otherwise be debarred. Often the interest of a subject depends as much on the way it is presented as on the subject itself. One writer will make it attractive, another repulsive. For instance, take a passage in history. Treated by one historian, it is like a desiccated mummy, dry, dull, disgusting, while under the spell of another it is, as it were, galvanized into a virile living thing, which not only pleases but captivates the reader. Diction. The first requisite of style is choice of words, and this comes under the head of diction, the property of style which has reference to the words and phrases used in speaking and writing. The secret of literary skill, from any standpoint, consists in putting the right word in the right place. In order to do this, it is imperative to know the meaning of the words we use, their exact literal meaning. Many synonymous words are seemingly interchangeable and appear as if the same meaning were applicable to 3 or 4 of them at the same time. But when all such words are reduced to a final analysis, it is clearly seen that there is a marked difference in their meaning. For instance, grief and sorrow seem to be identical, but they are not. Grief is active, sorrow is more or less passive. Grief is caused by troubles and misfortunes which come to us from the outside, while sorrow is often the consequence of our own acts. Grief is frequently loud and violent. Sorrow is always quiet and retiring. Grief shouts, sorrow remains calm. If you are not sure of the exact meaning of a word, look it up immediately in the dictionary. Sometimes some of our great scholars are puzzled over simple words in regard to meaning, spelling, or pronunciation. Whenever you meet a strange word, note it down until you discover its meaning and use. Read the best books you can get, books written by men and women who are acknowledged masters of language, and study how they use their words, where they place them in sentences, and the meanings they convey to the readers. Mix in good society. Listen attentively to good talkers, and try to imitate their manner of expression. If a word is used you do not understand, don't be ashamed to ask its meaning. True, a small vocabulary will carry you through, but it is an advantage to have a large one. When you live alone, a little pot serves just as well as a large one to cook your victuals, and it is handy and convenient. But when your friends or neighbors come to dine with you, you will need a much larger pot, and it is better to have it in store, so that you will not be put to shame for your scantiness of furnishings. Get as many words as you possibly can. If you don't need them now, pack them away in the garrets of your brain so that you can call upon them if you require them. Keep a notebook. Jot down the words you don't understand, or clearly understand, and consult the dictionary when you get time. Purity. Purity of style consists in using words which are reputable, national, and present, which means that the words are in current use by the best authorities, that they are used throughout the nation and not confined to one particular part, and that they are words in constant use at the present time. There are 2 guiding principles in the choice of words: good use and good taste. Good use tells us whether a word is right or wrong. Good taste, whether it is adapted to our purpose or not. A word that is obsolete, or too new to have gained a place in the language, or that is a provincialism, should not be used. Here are the 10 commandments of English style. 1. Do not use foreign words. 2. Do not use a long word when a short one will serve your purpose. Fire is much better than conflagration. 3. Do not use technical words, or those understood only by specialists in their respective lines, except when you are writing especially for such people. 4. Do not use slang. 5. Do not use provincialisms, as I guess for I think, I reckon for I know, etc. 6. Do not, in writing prose, Use poetical or antiquated words, as lore, ere, morn, yea, nay, verily, peradventure. 7. Do not use trite and hackneyed words and expressions, as on the job, up and in, down and out. 8. Do not use newspaper words which have not established a place in the language, as to bugle, to suicide, etc. 9. Do not use ungrammatical words and forms, as I ain't, he don't. 10. Do not use ambiguous words or phrases, as he showed me all about the house. Trite words, similes, and metaphors which have become hackneyed and worn out should be allowed to rest in the oblivion of past usage. Such expressions and phrases as Sweet 16, the almighty dollar, Uncle Sam, on the fence, the glorious Fourth, young America, the lords of creation, the rising generation, the weaker sex, the weaker vessel, sweetness long drawn out, and chief cook and bottle washer should be put on the shelf, as they are utterly worn out from too much usage. Some of the old similes which have outlived their usefulness and should be pensioned off are sweet as sugar, bold as a lion, strong as an ox, quick as a flash, cold as ice, stiff as a poker, white as snow, busy as a bee, pale as a ghost, rich as Croesus, cross as a bear, and a great many more, far too numerous to mention. Be as original as possible in the use of expression. Don't follow in the old rut, but try and strike out for yourself. This does not mean that you should try to set the style, or do anything outlandish or out of the way, or be an innovator on the prevailing custom. In order to be original, there is no necessity for you to introduce something novel or establish precedent. The probability is you are not fit to do either, by education or talent. While following the style of those who are acknowledged leaders, you can be original in your language. Try and clothe an idea different from what it has been clothed, and better. If you are speaking or writing of dancing, don't talk or write about tripping the light fantastic toe. It is over 200 years since Milton expressed it that way in L'Allegro. You're not a Milton, and besides, over 1 million have stolen it from Milton until it is now no longer worth stealing. Don't resurrect obsolete words, such as whilom, yclept, whiz, etc., and be careful in regard to obsolescent words, that is, words that are at the present time gradually passing from use, such as quoth, trow, betwixt, amongst, froward, etc. And beware of new words. Be original in the construction and arrangement of your language, but don't try to originate words. Leave that to the masters of language. And don't be the first to try such words. Wait until the chemists of speech have tested them and passed upon their merits. Quintilian said, "Prefer the oldest of the new, and the newest of the old." Pope put this in rhyme, and it still holds good. In words as fashions the same rule will hold, alike fantastic if too new or old. Be not the first by whom the new are tried, nor yet the last to lay the old aside. Propriety. Propriety of style consists in using words in their proper sense, and, as in the case of purity, good usage is the principal test. Many words have acquired in actual use a meaning very different from what they once possessed. Prevent formerly meant to go before, and that meaning is implied in its Latin derivation. Now it means to put a stop to hinder. To attain propriety of style, it is necessary to avoid confounding words derived from the same root, as respectfully and respectively. It is necessary to use words in their accepted sense, or the sense which everyday use sanctions. Simplicity. Simplicity of style has reference to the choice of simple words and their unaffected presentation. Simple words should always be used in preference to compound and complicated ones when they express the same, or almost the same, meaning. The Anglo-Saxon element in our language comprises the simple words which express the relations of everyday life: strong, terse, vigorous, the language of the fireside, street, market, and farm. It is this style which characterizes the Bible and many of the great English classics, such as the Pilgrim's Progress, Robinson Crusoe, and Gulliver's Travels. Clearness. Clearness of style should be one of the leading considerations with the beginner in composition. He must avoid all obscurity and ambiguous phrases. If he write a sentence or phrase, and see that a meaning might be inferred from it otherwise than intended, he should rewrite it in such a way that there can be no possible doubt. Words, phrases, or clauses that are closely related should be placed as near to each other as possible, that their mutual relation may clearly appear, and no word should be omitted that is necessary to the complete expression of thought. Unity. Unity is that property of style which keeps all parts of a sentence in connection with the principal thought, and logically subordinate to it. A sentence may be constructed as to suggest the idea of oneness to the mind, or it may be so loosely put together as to produce a confused and indefinite impression. Ideas that have but little connection should be expressed in separate sentences, and not crowded into one. Keep long parentheses out of the middle of your sentences, and when you have apparently brought your sentences to a close, don't try to continue the thought or idea by adding supplementary clauses. Strength. Strength is that property of style which gives animation, energy, and vivacity to language, and sustains the interest of the reader. It is as necessary to language as good food is to the body. Without it, the words are weak and feeble, and create little or no impression on the mind. In order to have strength, the language must be concise, that is, much expressed in little compass. You must hit the nail fairly on the head, and drive it in straight. Go critically over what you write, and strike out every word, phrase, and clause, the omission of which impairs neither the clearness nor force of the sentence, and so avoid redundancy, tautology, and circumlocution. Give the most important words the most prominent places, which, as has been pointed out elsewhere, are the beginning and end of the sentence. Harmony. Harmony is that property of style which gives a smoothness to the sentence, so that when the words are sounded, their connection becomes pleasing to the ear. It adapts sound to sense. Most people construct their sentences without giving thought to the way they will sound, and as a consequence, we have many jarring and discordant combinations, such as, "Thou strengthenedst thy position, and actedst arbitrarily and derogatorily to my interests." Harsh, disagreeable verbs are liable to occur with the Quaker form thou of the personal pronoun. This form is now nearly obsolete, the plural you being almost universally used. To obtain harmony in the sentence, long words that are hard to pronounce and combinations of letters of one kind should be avoided. Expressive of writer. Style is expressive of the writer as to who he is and what he is. As a matter of structure in composition, it is the indication of what a man can do. As a matter of quality, it is an indication of what he is. Kinds of style. Style has been classified in different ways, but it admits of so many designations that it is very hard to enumerate a table. In fact, there are as many styles as there are writers, for no two authors write exactly after the same form. However, we may classify the styles of the various authors in broad divisions as 1. Dry, 2. Plain, 3. Neat, 4. Elegant, 5. Florid, 6. Bombastic. The dry style excludes all ornament and makes no effort to appeal to any sense of beauty. Its object is simply to express the thoughts in a correct manner. This style is exemplified by Berkeley. The plain style does not seek ornamentation either, but aims to make clear and concise statements without any elaboration or embellishment. Locke and Whately illustrate the plain style. The neat style only aspires after ornament sparingly. Its object is to have correct figures, pure diction, and clear and harmonious sentences. Goldsmith and Gray are the acknowledged leaders in this kind of style. The elegant style uses every ornament that can beautify, and avoids every excess which would degrade. Macaulay and Addison have been enthroned as the kings of this style. To them all writers bend the knee in homage. The florid style goes to excess in superfluous and superficial ornamentation, and strains after a highly colored imagery. The poems of Ossian typify this style. The bombastic is characterized by such an excess of words, figures, and ornaments as to be ridiculous and disgusting. It is like a circus clown dressed up in gold tinsel. Dickens gives a fine example of it in Sergeant Buzfuz's speech in The Pickwick Papers. Among other varieties of style may be mentioned the colloquial, the laconic, the concise, the diffuse, the abrupt, the flowing, the quaint, the epigrammatic, the flowery, the feeble, the nervous, the vehement, and the affected. The manner of these is sufficiently indicated by the adjective used to describe them. In fact, style is as various as character and expresses the individuality of the writer, or in other words, as the French writer Buffon very aptly remarks, The style is the man himself. End of chapter 9.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 10. Suggestions. How to write, what to write, correct speaking and speakers. Rules of grammar and rhetoric are good in their own place. Their laws must be observed in order to express thoughts and ideas in the right way, so that they shall convey a determinate sense and meaning in a pleasing and acceptable manner. Hard and fast rules, however, can never make a writer or author. That is the business of old Mother Nature, and nothing can take her place. If Nature has not endowed a man with faculties to put his ideas into proper composition, he cannot do so. He may have no ideas worthy of the recording. If a person has not a thought to express, it cannot be expressed. Something cannot be manufactured out of nothing. The author must have thoughts and ideas before he can express them on paper. These come to him by nature and environment, and are developed and strengthened by study. There is an old Latin quotation in regard to the poet which says, "Poeta nascitur non fit," the translation of which, "The poet is born, not made." To a degree the same applies to the author. Some men are great scholars as far as book learning is concerned, yet they cannot express themselves in passable composition. Their knowledge is like gold locked up in a chest where it is of no value to themselves or the rest of the world. The best way to learn to write is to sit down and write, just as the best way to learn to ride a bicycle is to mount the wheel and pedal away. Write first about common things, subjects that are familiar to you. Try, for instance, an essay on a cat. Say something original about her. Don't say, "She is very playful when young, but becomes grave as she grows old." That has been said more than 50,000 times before. Tell what you have seen the family cat doing, how she caught a mouse in the garret, and what she did after catching it. Familiar themes are always the best for the beginner. Don't attempt to describe a scene in Australia if you have never been there and know nothing of the country. Never hunt for subjects, there are thousands around you. Describe what you saw yesterday: a fire, a runaway horse, a dog fight on the street, and be original in your description. Imitate the best writers in their style, but not in their exact words. Get out of the beaten path, make a pathway of your own. Know what you write about, write what you know. This is a golden rule to which you must adhere. To know, you must study. The world is an open book in which all who run may read. Nature is one great volume, the pages of which are open to the peasant as well as to the peer. Study nature's moods and tenses, for they are vastly more important than those of the grammar. Book learning is most desirable, but, after all, it is only theory and not practice. The grandest allegory in the English, in fact, in any language, was written by an ignorant, so-called ignorant, tinker named John Bunyan. Shakespeare was not a scholar in the sense we regard the term today, yet no man ever lived, or probably ever will live, that equalled or will equal him in the expression of thought. He simply read the book of nature and interpreted it from the standpoint of his own magnificent genius. Don't imagine that a college education is necessary to success as a writer. Far from it. Some of our college men are deadheads, drones, parasites on the body social, not alone useless to the world, but to themselves. A person may be so ornamental that he is valueless from any other standpoint. As a general rule, ornamental things serve but little purpose. A man may know so much of everything that he knows little of anything. This may sound paradoxical, but, nevertheless, experience proves its truth. If you are poor, that is not a detriment, but an advantage. Poverty is an incentive to endeavor, not a drawback. Better to be born with a good working brain in your head than with a gold spoon in your mouth. If the world had been depending on the so-called pets of fortune, it would have deteriorated long ago. From the pits of poverty, from the arenas of suffering, from the hovels of neglect, from the backwood cabins of obscurity, from the lanes and byways of oppression, from the dingy garrets and basements of unending toil and drudgery, have come men and women who have made history, made the world brighter, better, higher, holier for their existence in it, made of it a place good to live in and worthy to die in, men and women who have hallowed it by their footsteps and sanctified it with their presence, and in many cases consecrated it with their blood. Poverty is a blessing, not an evil, a benison from the Father's hand, if accepted in the right spirit. Instead of retarding, it has elevated literature in all ages. Homer was a blind beggarman singing his snatches of song for the dole of charity. Grand old Socrates, oracle of wisdom, many a day went without his dinner because he had not the wherewithal to get it, while teaching the youth of Athens. The divine Dante was nothing better than a beggar, houseless, homeless, friendless, wandering through Italy while he composed his immortal cantos. Milton, who in his blindness looked where angels fear to tread, was steeped in poverty while writing his sublime conception, Paradise Lost. Shakespeare was glad to hold and water the horses of patrons outside the White Horse Theatre for a few pennies in order to buy bread. Burns burst forth in never-dying song while guiding the ploughshare. Poor Heinrich Heine, neglected and in poverty, from his mattress grave of suffering in Paris added literary laurels to the wealth of his German fatherland. In America, Elihu Burritt, while attending the Anvil, made himself a master of a score of languages and became the literary lion of his age and country. In other fields of endeavour, poverty has been the spur to action. Napoleon was born in obscurity, the son of a hand-to-mouth scrivener in the backward island of Corsica. Abraham Lincoln, the boast and pride of America, the man who made this land too hot for the feet of slaves, came from a log cabin in the Ohio backwoods. So did James A. Garfield. Ulysses Grant came from a tan yard to become the world's greatest general. Thomas A. Edison commenced as a newsboy on a railway train. The examples of these men are incentives to action. Poverty thrusts them forward instead of keeping them back. Therefore, if you are poor, make your circumstances a means to an end. Have ambition, keep a goal in sight, and bend every energy to reach that goal. A story is told of Thomas Carlyle the day he attained the highest honour the literary world could confer upon him, when he was elected Lord Rector of Edinburgh University. After his installation speech, in going through the halls he met a student seemingly deep in study. In his own peculiar, abrupt, crusty way, the sage of Chelsea interrogated the young man. "For what profession are you studying?" "I don't know," returned the youth. "You don't know!" thundered Carlyle. "Young man, you are a fool." Then he went on to qualify his vehement remark. "My boy, when I was your age, I was stooped in the grinding, gripping poverty in a little village of Ecclefechan, in the wilds of Blankfriarshire, where in all the place only the minister and myself could read the Bible. Yet poor and obscure as I was, in my mind's eye I saw a chair awaiting for me in the Temple of Fame, and day and night and day I studied until I sat in that chair today as Lord Rector of Edinburgh University." Another Scotchman, Robert Buchanan, the famous novelist, set out for London from Glasgow with but a half-crown in his pocket. "Here goes," said he, "for a grave in Westminster Abbey." He was not much of a scholar, but his ambition carried him on and he became one of the great literary lions of the world's metropolis. Henry M. Stanley was a poorhouse waif whose real name was John Rowlands. He was brought up in a Welsh workhouse, but he had ambition, so he rose to be a great explorer, a great writer, became a member of Parliament, and was knighted by the British sovereign. Have ambition to succeed and you will succeed. Cut the word failure out of your lexicon. Don't acknowledge it. Remember, "In life's earnest battle they only prevail who daily march onward and never say fail." Let every obstacle you encounter be but a stepping stone in the path of onward progress to the goal of success. If untoward circumstances surround you, resolve to overcome them. Bunyan wrote The Pilgrim's Progress in Bedford jail on scraps of wrapping paper while he was half starved on a diet of bread and water. That unfortunate American genius, Edgar Allan Poe, wrote The Raven, the most wonderful conception as well as the most highly artistic poem in all English literature, in a little cottage in the Fordham section of New York, while he was in the direst straits of want. Throughout all his short and wonderfully brilliant career, poor Poe never had a dollar he could call his own. Such, however, was both his fault and his misfortune, and he is a bad exemplar. Don't think that the knowledge of a library of books is essential to success as a writer. Often a multiplicity of books is confusing. Master a few good books, and master them well, and you will have all that is necessary. A great authority has said, "Beware of the man of one book," which means that a man of one book is a master of the craft. It is claimed that a thorough knowledge of the Bible alone will make any person a master of literature. Certain it is that the Bible and Shakespeare constitute an epitome of the essentials of knowledge. Shakespeare gathered the fruitage of all who went before him. He has sown the seeds for all who shall ever come after him. He was the great intellectual ocean whose waves touch the continents of all thought. Books are cheap nowadays. The greatest works, thanks to the printing press, are within the reach of all, and the more you read the better, providing they are worth reading. Sometimes a man takes poison into his system, unconscious of the fact that it is poison, as in the case of certain foods, and it is very hard to throw off its effects. Therefore, be careful in your choice of reading matter. If you cannot afford a full library, and as has been said, such is not necessary, select a few of the great works of the master minds, assimilate and digest them, so that they will be of advantage to your literary system. Elsewhere in this volume is given a list of some of the world's masterpieces from which you can make a selection. Your brain is a storehouse. Don't put useless furniture into it to crowd it to the exclusion of what is useful. Lay up only the valuable and serviceable kind which you can call into requisition at any moment. As it is necessary to study the best authors in order to be a writer, so it is necessary to study the best speakers in order to talk with correctness and in good style. To talk rightly you must imitate the masters of oral speech. Listen to the best conversationalists and how they express themselves. Go to hear the leading lectures, speeches, and sermons. No need to imitate the gestures of elocution. It is nature, not art, that makes the elocutionist and the orator. It is not how a speaker expresses himself, but the language which he uses and the manner of its use which should interest you. Have you heard the present-day masters of speech? There have been past-time masters, but their tongues are stilled in the dust of the grave, and you can only read their eloquence now. You can, however, listen to the charm of the living. To many of us, voices still speak from the grave, voices to which we have listened when fired with the divine essence of speech. Perhaps you have hung with rapture on the words of Beecher and Talmage. Both thrilled the souls of men and won countless thousands over to a living gospel. Both were masters of the word. They scattered the flowers of rhetoric on the shrine of elegance, and hurled veritable bouquets at their audiences, which were eagerly seized by the latter and treasured in the storehouse of memory. Both were scholars and philosophers, yet they were far surpassed by Spurgeon, a plain man of the people, with little or no claim to education in the modern sense of the word. Spurgeon by his speech attracted thousands to his tabernacle. The Protestant and Catholic, Turk, Jew, and Mohammedan rushed to hear him, and listened entranced to his language. Such another was Dwight L. Moody, the greatest evangelist the world has ever known. Moody was not a man of learning. He commenced life as a shoe salesman in Chicago. Yet no man ever lived who drew such audiences and so fascinated them with the spell of his speech. Oh, that was personal magnetism, you will say. But it was nothing of the kind. It was the burning words that fell from the lips of these men, and the way, the manner, the force with which they used those words that counted and attracted the crowds to listen unto them. Personal magnetism or personal appearance entered not as factors into their success. Indeed, as far as physique were concerned, some of them were handicapped. Spurgeon was a short, podgy, fat little man. Moody was like a country farmer. Talmage, in his big cloak, was one of the most slovenly of men, and only Beecher was passable in the way of refinement and gentlemanly bearing. Physical appearance, as so many think, is not the sesame to the interest of an audience. Daniel O'Connell, the Irish Tribune, was a homely, ugly, awkward, ungainly man, yet his words attracted millions to his side, and gained for him the hostile ear of the British Parliament. He was a master of verbiage, and knew just what to say to captivate his audiences. It is words and their placing that count on almost all occasions. No matter how refined in our respects the person may be, if he use words wrongly and express himself in language not in accordance with proper construction, he will repel you, whereas the man who places his words correctly, and employs language in harmony with the laws of good speech, let him be ever so humble, will attract and have an influence over you. The good speaker, the correct speaker, is always able to command attention, and doors are thrown open to him which remain closed to others not equipped with a like facility of expression. The man who can talk well and to the point need never fear to go idle. He is required in nearly every walk of life and field of human endeavour. The world wants him at every turn. Employers are constantly on the lookout for good talkers, those who are able to attract the public and convince others by the force of their language. A man may be able, educated, refined, of unblemished character; nevertheless, if he lack the power to express himself, put forth his views in good and appropriate speech, he has yet to take a back seat, while some one with much less ability gets the opportunity to come to the front because he can clothe his ideas in ready words and talk effectively. You may again say that nature, not art, makes a man a fluent speaker. To a degree this is true, but it is art that makes him a correct speaker, and correctness leads to fluency. It is possible for everyone to become a correct speaker, if he will but persevere and take a little pains and care. At the risk of repetition, good advice may be here emphasized. Listen to the best speakers and note carefully the words which impress you most. Keep a notebook and jot down words, phrases, sentences that are in any way striking or out of the ordinary run. If you do not understand the exact meaning of a word you have heard, look it up in the dictionary. There are many words called synonyms which have almost a like signification. Nevertheless, when examined, they express different shades of meaning, and in some cases, instead of being close related, are widely divergent. Beware of such words. Find their exact meaning and learn to use them in the right places. Be open to criticism. Don't resent it, but rather invite it, and look upon those as friends who point out your defects in order that you may remedy them. End of chapter 10.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 11. Slang. Origin, American slang, foreign slang. Slang is more or less common in nearly all ranks of society and in every walk of life at the present day. Slang words and expressions have crept into our everyday language, and so insidiously that they have not been detected by the great majority of speakers, and so have become part and parcel of their vocabulary on an equal footing with the legitimate words of speech. They are called upon to do similar service as the ordinary words used in everyday conversation, to express thoughts and desires, and convey meaning from one to another. In fact, in some cases, slang has become so useful that it has far outstripped classic speech and made for itself such a position in the vernacular that it would be very hard in some cases to get along without it. Slang words have usurped the place of regular words of language in very many instances, and reign supreme in their own strength and influence. Cant and slang are often confused in the popular mind, yet they are not synonymous, though very closely allied, and proceeding from a common gipsy origin. Cant is the language of a certain class, the peculiar phraseology or dialect of a certain craft, trade, or profession, and is not readily understood save by the initiated of such craft, trade, or profession. It may be correct according to the rules of grammar, but it is not universal. It is confined to certain parts and localities, and is only intelligible to those for whom it is intended. In short, it is an esoteric language which only the initiated can understand. The jargon or patter of thieves is cant, and is only understood by thieves who have been let into its significance. The initiated language of professional gamblers is cant, and is only intelligible to gamblers. On the other hand, slang, as it is nowadays, belongs to no particular class, but is scattered all over, and gets entrée into every kind of society, and is understood by all where it passes current in everyday expression. Of course, the nature of slang, to a great extent, depends upon the locality, as it chiefly is concerned with colloquialisms, or words and phrases common to a particular section. For instance, the slang of London is slightly different from that of New York, and some words in the one city may be unintelligible in the other, though well understood in that which they are current. Nevertheless, slang may be said to be universally understood. To kick the bucket, to cross the Jordan, to hop the twig, are just as expressive of the departing from life in the backwoods of America or the wilds of Australia as they are in London or Dublin. Slang simply consists of words and phrases which pass current, but are not refined, nor elegant enough to be admitted into polite speech or literature whenever they are recognized as such. But, as has been said, a great many use slang without their knowing it is slang, and incorporate it into their everyday speech and conversation. Some authors purposely use slang to give emphasis and spice in familiar and humorous writing, but they should not be imitated by the tyro. A master such as Dickens is forgivable, but in the novice it is unpardonable. There are several kinds of slang attached to different professions and classes of society. For instance, there is college slang, political slang, sporting slang, etc. It is the nature of slang to circulate freely among all classes, yet there are several kinds of this current form of language corresponding to the several classes of society. The two great divisions of slang are the vulgar of the uneducated and coarse-minded, and the high-toned slang of the so-called upper classes, the educated and the wealthy. The hoyden of the gutter does not use the same slang as my lady in her boudoir, but both use it, and so expressive is it that the one might readily understand the other if brought in contact. Therefore, there are what may be styled an ignorant slang and an educated slang, the one common to the purlieus and the alleys, the other to the parlour and the drawing-room. In all cases the object of slang is to express an idea in a more vigorous, piquant, and terse manner than standard usage ordinarily admits. A schoolgirl, when she wants to praise a baby, exclaims, "Oh, isn't he awfully cute!" To say that he is very nice would be too weak a way to express her admiration. When a handsome girl appears on the street, an enthusiastic masculine admirer, to express his appreciation of her beauty, tells you, "She is a peach, a bird, a cuckoo," any of which accentuates his estimation of the young lady, and is much more emphatic than saying, "She is a beautiful girl, a handsome maiden, or a lovely young woman." When a politician defeats his rival, he will tell you it was a cinch, he had a walk-over, to impress you how easy it was to gain victory. Some slang expressions are of the nature of metaphors and are highly figurative. Such are to pass in your checks, to hold up, to pull the wool over your eyes, to talk through your hat, to fire out, to go back on, to make yourself solid with, to have a jag on, to be loaded, to freeze onto, to bark up the wrong tree, don't monkey with the buzz-saw, and in the soup. Most slang had a bad origin. The greater part originated in the cant of thieves' Latin, but it broke away from this cant of malefactors in time, and gradually evolved itself from its unsavoury past, until it developed into a current form of expressive speech. Some slang, however, can trace its origin back to very respectable sources. Stolen fruits are sweet may be traced to the Bible in sentiment. Proverbs 9:17 has it, stolen waters are sweet. What are you giving me, supposed to be a thorough Americanism, is based upon Genesis 38:16. The common slang, a bad man, in referring to Western desperadoes, in almost the identical sense now used, is found in Spenser's Faery Queen, Massinger's play A New Way to Pay Old Debts, and in Shakespeare's King Henry VIII. The expression to blow on, meaning to inform, is in Shakespeare's As You Like It. It's all Greek to me is traceable to the play of Julius Caesar. All cry and no wool is in Butler's Hudibras. Pious frauds, meaning hypocrites, is from the same source. Too thin, referring to an excuse, is from Smollett's Peregrine Pickle. Shakespeare also used it. America has had a large share in contributing to modern slang. The heathen Chiney and ways that are dark and tricks that are vain are from Bret Harte's Truthful James. Not for Joe arose during the Civil War when one soldier refused to give a drink to another. Not if I know myself had its origin in Chicago. What's the matter with blank? He's all right. Had its beginning in Chicago also, and first was, what's the matter with Hannah, referring to a lazy domestic servant. There's millions in it, and, by a large majority, came from Mark Twain's Gilded Age. Pull down your vest, jim-jams, got 'em bad. That's what's the matter. Go hire a hall, take in your sign, dry up, hump yourself. It's the man around the corner, putting up a job, put a head on him, no back talk, bottom dollar, went off on his ear, chalk it down, staving him off, making it warm, dropping him gently, dead gone, busted, counter jump, put up or shut up, bang up, smart aleck, too much jaw, chin music, top heavy, barefooted on the top of the head, a little too fresh, champion liar, chief cook and bottle washer, bag and baggage, as fine as silk, name your poison, died with his boots on, old hoss, hunky-dory, hold your horses, galoot, and many others in use at present are all Americanisms in slang. California especially has been most fecund in this class of figurative language. To this state we owe "go off and die," "don't you forget it," "rough deal," "square deal," "flush times," "pool your issues," "go bury yourself," "go drown yourself," "give your tongue a vacation," "a bad egg," "go climb a tree," "plug hats," "Dolly Vardens," "well fixed," "down to bedrock," "hard pan," "pay dirt," "petered out," "it won't wash," "slug of whiskey," "it pans out well," and "I should smile." Small potatoes and a few in the hill, soft snap, all fired, gol durn it, an uphill job, slick, short cut, guess not, correct thing, are Bostonisms. The terms innocent, acknowledge the corn, bark up the wrong tree, great snakes, I reckon, playing possum, dead shot, had their origins in the Southern States. Doggone it, that beats the Dutch, you bet your boots, sprang from New York. Step down and out originated in the Beecher trial, just as brainstorm originated in the Thaw trial. Among the slang phrases that have come directly to us from England may be mentioned throw up the sponge, draw it mild, give us a rest, deadbeat, on the shelf, up the spout, stunning, gift of the gab, etc. The newspapers are responsible for a large part of the slang. Reporters, staff writers, and even editors put words and phrases into the mouths of individuals which they never utter. New York is supposed to be the headquarters of slang, particularly that portion of it known as the Bowery. All transgressions and corruptions of language are supposed to originate in that unclassic section, while the truth is that the laws of polite English are as much violated on Fifth Avenue. Of course, the foreign element mincing their pidgin English have given the Bowery an unenviable reputation. But there are just as good speakers of the vernacular on the Bowery as elsewhere in the greater city. Yet every inexperienced newspaper reporter thinks that it is incumbent on him to hold the Bowery up to ridicule and laughter, so he sits down and out of his circumscribed brain mutilates the English tongue (he can rarely coin a word), and blames the mutilation on the Bowery. 'Tis the same with newspapers and authors, too, detracting the Irish race. Men and women who have never seen the green hills of Ireland paint Irish characters as boors and blunderers, and make them say ludicrous things, and use such language as is never heard within the four walls of Ireland. 'Tis very well known that Ireland is the most learned country on the face of the earth, is, and has been. The schoolmaster has been abroad there for hundreds, almost thousands of years, and nowhere else in the world today is the King's English spoken so purely as in the cities and towns of the little Western Isle. Current events, happenings of everyday life, often give rise to slang words, and these, after a time, come into such general use that they take their places in everyday speech like ordinary words, and, as has been said, their users forget that they were once slang. For instance, the days of the Land League in Ireland originated the word boycott, which was the name of a very unpopular landlord, Captain Boycott. The people refused to work for him, and his crops rotted on the ground. From this time, anyone who came into disfavour, and whom his neighbours refused to assist in any way, was said to be boycotted. Therefore, to boycott means to punish by abandoning or depriving a person of the assistance of others. At first it was a notoriously slang word, but now it is standard in the English dictionaries. Politics add to our slang words and phrases. From this source we get dark horse, the grey mare is the better horse, barrel of money, buncombe, gerrymander, scalawag, henchman, log rolling, pulling the wires, taking the stump, machine, slate, etc. The money market furnishes us with corner, bull, bear, lamb, slump, and several others. The custom of the times and the requirements of current expression require the best of us to use slang words and phrases on occasion. Often we do not know they are slang, just as a child often uses profane words without consciousness of their being so. We should avoid the use of slang as much as possible, even when it serves to convey our ideas in a forceful manner, and when it has not gained a firm foothold in current speech, it should be used not at all. Remember that most all slang is of vulgar origin, and bears upon its face the bend sinister of vulgarity. Of the slang that is of good birth, pass it by if you can, for it is like a broken-down gentleman, of little good to anyone. Imitate the great masters as much as you will in classical literature, but when it comes to their slang, draw the line. Dean Swift, the great Irish satirist, coined the word "phiz" for face. Don't imitate him. If you are speaking or writing of the beauty of a lady's face, don't call it her phiz. The Dean, as an intellectual giant, had a license to do so. You haven't. Shakespeare used the word flush to indicate plenty of money. Well, just remember there was only one Shakespeare, and he was the only one that had a right to use that word in that sense. You'll never be a Shakespeare. There will never be such another. Nature exhausted herself in producing him. Bulwer used the word stretch for hang, as to stretch his neck. Don't follow his example in such use of the word. Above all, avoid the low, coarse, vulgar slang, which is made to pass for wit among the riff-raff of the street. If you are speaking or writing of a person having died last night, don't say or write, "He hopped the twig," or "He kicked the bucket." If you are compelled to listen to a person discoursing on a subject of which he knows little or nothing, don't say, "He is talking through his hat." If you are telling of having shaken hands with Mr. Roosevelt, don't say, "He tipped me his flipper." If you are speaking of a wealthy man, don't say, "He has plenty of spondulics," or "the long green." All such slang is low, coarse, and vulgar, and is to be frowned upon on any and every occasion. If you use slang, use the refined kind, and use it like a gentleman, that it will not hurt or give offence to anyone. Cardinal Newman defined a gentleman as he who never inflicts pain. Be a gentleman in your slang. Never inflict pain. End of chapter 11.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andrew LeBrun, Boston, Massachusetts. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 12. Writing for Newspapers. Qualification, Appropriate Subjects, Directions. The newspaper nowadays goes into every home in the land. What was formerly regarded as a luxury is now looked upon as a necessity. No matter how poor the individual, he is not too poor to afford a penny to learn not only what is taking place around him in his own immediate vicinity, but also what is happening in every quarter of the globe. The laborer on the street can be as well posted on the news of the day as the banker in his office. Through the newspaper he can feel the pulse of the country and find whether its vitality is increasing or diminishing. He can read the signs of the times and scan the political horizon for what concerns his own interests. The doings of foreign countries are spread before him, and he can see at a glance the occurrences in the remotest corners of the earth. If a fire occurred in London last night, he can read about it at his breakfast table in New York this morning, and probably get a better account than the Londoners themselves. If a duel takes place in Paris, he can read all about it, even before the contestants have left the field. There are upwards of 3,000 daily newspapers in the United States, more than 2,000 of which are published in towns containing less than 100,000 inhabitants. In fact, many places of less than 10,000 population can boast the publishing of a daily newspaper. There are more than 15,000 weeklies published. Some of the so-called country papers wield quite an influence in their localities, and even outside, and are money-making agencies for their owners and those connected with them, both by way of circulation and advertisements. It is surprising the number of people in this country who make a living in the newspaper field. Apart from the regular toilers, there are thousands of men and women who make newspaper work a side issue, who add tiny sums of pin money to their incomes by occasional contributions to the daily, weekly, and monthly press. Most of these people are only persons of ordinary, everyday ability, having just enough education to express themselves intelligently in writing. It is a mistake to imagine, as so many do, that an extended education is necessary for newspaper work. Not at all. On the contrary, in some cases, a high-class education is a hindrance, not a help, in this direction. The general newspaper does not want learned disquisitions nor philosophical theses. As its name implies, it wants news, current news, interesting news, something to appeal to its readers, to arouse them and rivet their attention. In this respect, very often a boy can write a better article than a college professor. The professor would be apt to use words beyond the capacity of most of the readers, while the boy, not knowing such words, would probably simply tell what he saw, how great the damage was, who were killed or injured, etc., and use language which all would understand. Of course, there are some brilliant scholars, deeply read men and women in the newspaper realm, but, on the whole, those who have made the greatest names commenced ignorant enough, and most of them graduated by way of the country paper. Some of the leading writers of England and America at the present time started their literary careers by contributing to the rural press. They perfected and polished themselves as they went along until they were able to make names for themselves in universal literature. If you want to contribute to newspapers or enter the newspaper field as a means of livelihood, don't let lack of a college or university education stand in your way. As has been said elsewhere in this book, some of the greatest masters of English literature were men who had but little advantage in the way of book learning. Shakespeare, Bunyan, Burns, and scores of others, who have left their names indelibly inscribed on the tablets of fame, had little to boast in the way of book education, but they had what is popularly known as horse sense, and a good working knowledge of the world. In other words, they understood human nature, and were natural themselves. Shakespeare understood mankind because he was himself a man. Hence, he has portrayed the feelings, the emotions, the passions with a master's touch, delineating the king in his place as true to nature as he has done the peasant in his hut. The monitor within his own breast gave him warning as to what was right and what was wrong, just as the daemon ever by the side of old Socrates whispered in his ear the course to pursue under any and all circumstances. Burns, guiding the plough, conceived thoughts and clothed them in a language which has never, nor probably ever will be, surpassed by all the learning which art can confer. These men were natural, and it was the perfection of this naturality that wreathed their brows with the never-fading laurels of undying fame. If you would essay to write for the newspaper, you must be natural, and express yourself in your accustomed way, without putting on airs or frills. You must not ape ornaments and indulge in bombast or rhodomontade, which stamp a writer as not only superficial, but silly. There is no room for such in the everyday newspaper. It wants facts stated in plain, unvarnished, unadorned language. True, you should read the best authors and, as far as possible, imitate their style, but don't try to literally copy them. Be yourself on every occasion, no one else. Not like Homer would I write, not like Dante if I might, not like Shakespeare at his best, not like Goethe or the rest. Like myself, however small, like myself or not at all. Put yourself in the place of the reader, and write what will interest yourself, and in such a way that your language will appeal to your own ideas of the fitness of things. You belong to the great commonplace majority. Therefore, don't forget that in writing for the newspapers you are writing for that majority, and not for the learned and aesthetic minority. Remember, you are writing for the man on the street and in the streetcar. You want to interest him, to compel him to read what you have to say. He does not want a display of learning. He wants news about something which concerns himself, and you must tell it to him in a plain, simple manner, just as you would do if you were face to face with him. What can you write about? Why, about anything that will constitute current news, some leading event of the day, anything that will appeal to the readers of the paper to which you wish to submit it. No matter in what locality you may live, however backward it may be, you can always find something of genuine human interest to others. If there is no news happening, write of something that appeals to yourself. We are all constituted alike, and the chances are that what will interest you will interest others. Descriptions of adventure are generally acceptable. Tell of a fox hunt, or a badger hunt, or a bear chase. If there is any important manufacturing plant in your neighborhood, describe it, and, if possible, get photographs, for photography plays a very important part in the news items of today. If a great man lives near you, one whose name is on the tip of every tongue, go and get an interview with him, obtain his views on the public questions of the day, describe his home life and his surroundings, and how he spends his time. Try and strike something germane to the moment, something that stands out prominently in the limelight of the passing show. If a noted personage, some famous man or woman, is visiting the country, it is a good time to write up the place from which he or she comes, and the record he or she has made there. For instance, it was opportune to write of Sulu and the little Pacific archipelago during the Sultan's trip through the country. If an attempt is made to blow up an American battleship, say, in the harbor of Apia in Samoa, it affords a chance to write about Samoa and Robert Louis Stevenson. When Manuel was hurled from the throne of Portugal, it was a ripe time to write of Portugal and Portuguese affairs. If any great occurrence is taking place in a foreign country, such as the crowning of a king or the dethronement of a monarch, it is a good time to write up the history of the country and describe the events leading up to the main issue. When a particularly savage outbreak occurs amongst wild tribes in the dependencies, such as a rising of the Manobos in the Philippines, it is opportune to write of such tribes and their surroundings, and the causes leading up to the revolt. Be constantly on the lookout for something that will suit the passing hour. Read the daily papers, and probably in some obscure corner you may find something that will serve you as a foundation for a good article, something, at least, that will give you a clue. Be circumspect in your selection of a paper to which to submit your copy. Know the tone and general import of the paper, its social leanings and political affiliations, also its religious sentiments, and, in fact, all the particulars you can regarding it. It would be injudicious for you to send an article on a prize fight to a religious paper, or, vice versa, an account of a church meeting to the editor of a sporting sheet. If you get your copy back, don't be disappointed, nor yet disheartened. Perseverance counts more in the newspaper field than anywhere else, and only perseverance wins in the long run. You must become resilient. If you are pressed down, spring up again. No matter how many rebuffs you may receive, do not be discouraged, but call fresh energy to your assistance and make another stand. If the right stuff is in you, it is sure to be discovered. Your light will not remain long hidden under a bushel in the newspaper domain. If you can deliver the goods, editors will soon be begging you instead of your begging them. Those men are constantly on the lookout for persons who can make good. Once you get into print, the battle is won, for it will be an incentive to you to persevere and improve yourself at every turn. Go over everything you write, cut and slash and prune until you get it into as perfect form as possible. Eliminate every superfluous word, and be careful to strike out all ambiguous expressions and references. If you are writing for a weekly paper, remember it differs from a daily one. Weeklies want what will not alone interest the man on the street, but the woman at the fireside. They want out-of-the-way facts, curious scraps of lore, personal notes of famous or eccentric people, reminiscences of exciting experiences, interesting gleanings in life's numberless byways. In short, anything that will entertain, amuse, instruct the home circle. There is always something occurring in your immediate surroundings, some curious event or thrilling episode that will furnish you with the data for an article. You must know the nature of the weekly to which you submit your copy, the same as you must know the daily. For instance, the Christian Herald, while avowedly a religious weekly, treats such secular matters as makes the paper appeal to all. On its religious side, it is non-sectarian, covering the broad field of Christianity throughout the world. On its secular side, it deals with human events in such an impartial way that everyone, no matter to what class they may belong or to what creed they may subscribe, can take a living personal interest. The monthlies offer another attractive field for the literary aspirant. Here, again, don't think that you must be a university professor to write for a monthly magazine. Many, indeed most, of the foremost magazine contributors are men and women who have never passed through a college, except by going in at the front door and emerging from the back one. However, for the most part, they are individuals of wide experience, who know the practical side of life, as distinguished from the theoretical. The ordinary monthly magazine treats of the leading questions and issues which are engaging the attention of the world for the moment, great inventions, great discoveries, whatever is engrossing the popular mind for the time being, such as flying machines, battleships, skyscrapers, the opening of mines, the development of new lands, political issues, views of party leaders, character sketches of distinguished personages, etc. However, before trying your skill for a monthly magazine, it would be well for you to have a good apprenticeship in writing for the daily press. Above all things, remember that perseverance is the key that opens the door of success. Persevere. If you are turned down, don't get disheartened. On the contrary, let the rebuff act as a stimulant to further effort. Many of the most successful writers of our time have been turned down again and again. For days and months, even years, some of them have hawked their wares from one literary door to another until they found a purchaser. You may be a great writer in embryo, but you will never develop into a fetus, not to speak of full maturity, unless you bring out what is in you. Give yourself a chance to grow, and seize upon everything that will enlarge the scope of your horizon. Keep your eyes wide open, and there is not a moment of the day in which you will not see something to interest you, and in which you may be able to interest others. Learn, too, how to read Nature's book. There's a lesson in everything, in the stones, the grass, the trees, the babbling brooks, and the singing birds. Interpret the lesson for yourself, then teach it to others. Always be in earnest in your writing. Go about it in a determined kind of way. Don't be faint-hearted or backward. Be brave. Be brave, and evermore be brave. On the wide tented field in the battle of life, with an army of millions before you, like a hero of old gird your soul for the strife, and let not the foeman tramp o'er you. Act like a soldier, and proudly rush on, the most valiant in bravery's van. With keen flashing sword cut your way to the front, and show to the world you're a man. If you are of the masculine gender, be a man in all things, in the highest and best acceptation of the word. That is the noblest title you can boast, higher far than that of earl or duke, emperor or king. In the same way, womanhood is the grandest crown the feminine head can wear. When the world frowns on you, and everything seems to go wrong, possess your soul in patience, and hope for the dawn of a brighter day. It will come. The sun is always shining behind the darkest clouds. When you get your manuscripts back, again and again, don't despair, nor think the editor cruel and unkind. He too has troubles of his own. Keep up your spirits until you have made the final test and put your talents to a last analysis. Then, if you find you cannot get into print, be sure that newspaper writing or literary work is not your forte, and turn to something else. If nothing better presents itself, try shoemaking or digging ditches. Remember, honest labor, no matter how humble, is ever dignified. If you are a woman, throw aside the pen, sit down and darn your brother's, your father's, or your husband's socks, or put on a calico apron, take soap and water and scrub the floor. No matter who you are, do something useful. That old sophistry about the world owing you a living has been exploded long ago. The world does not owe you a living, but you owe it servitude, and if you do not pay the debt, you are not serving the purpose of an all-wise Providence, and filling the place for which you were created. It is for you to serve the world, to make it better, brighter, higher, holier, grander, nobler, richer, for your having lived in it. This you can do in no matter what position fortune has cast you, whether it be that of street laborer or president. Fight the good fight, and gain the victory. Above all, to thine own self be true, and 'twill follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. End of Chapter 12. Writing for Newspapers.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 13. Choice of Words. Small words. Their importance. The Anglo-Saxon element. In another place in this book, advice has been given to never use a long word when a short one will serve the same purpose. This advice is to be emphasized. Words of learned length and thundering sound should be avoided on all possible occasions. They proclaim shallowness of intellect and vanity of mind. The great purists, the masters of diction, the exemplars of style, used short, simple words that all could understand, words about which there could be no ambiguity as to meaning. It must be remembered that by our words we teach others. Therefore, a very great responsibility rests upon us in regard to the use of a right language. We must take care that we think and speak in a way so clear that there may be no misapprehension or danger of conveying wrong impressions by vague and misty ideas enunciated in terms which are liable to be misunderstood by those whom we address. Words give a body or form to our ideas, without which they are apt to be so foggy that we do not see where they are weak or false. We must make the endeavor to employ such words as will put the idea we have in our own mind into the mind of another. This is the greatest art in the world, to clothe our ideas in words clear and comprehensive to the intelligence of others. It is the art which the teacher, the minister, the lawyer, the orator, the business man must master if they would command success in their various fields of endeavor. It is very hard to convey an idea to, and impress it on, another, when he has but a faint conception of the language in which the idea is expressed, but it is impossible to convey it at all when the words in which it is clothed are unintelligible to the listener. If we address an audience of ordinary men and women in the English language, but use such words as they cannot comprehend, we might as well speak to them in Coptic or Chinese, for they will derive no benefit from our address, inasmuch as the ideas we wish to convey are expressed in words which communicate no intelligent meaning to their minds. Long words, learned words, words directly derived from other languages are only understood by those who have had the advantages of an extended education. All have not had such advantages. The great majority in this grand and glorious country of ours have to hustle for a living from an early age. Though education is free and compulsory also, very many never get further than the 3 R's. These are the men with whom we have to deal most in the arena of life, the men with the horny palms and the iron muscles, the men who build our houses, construct our railroads, drive our streetcars and trains, till our fields, harvest our crops. In a word, the men who form the foundation of all society, the men on whom the world depends to make its wheels go round. The language of the colleges and universities is not for them, and they can get along very well without it. They have no need for it at all in their respective callings. The plain, simple words of everyday life, to which the common people have been used around their own firesides from childhood, are the words we must use in our dealings with them. Such words are understood by them, and understood by the learned as well. Why, then, not use them universally and all the time? Why make a one-sided affair of language by using words which only one class of the people, the so-called learned class, can understand? Would it not be better to use on all occasions language which the both classes can understand? If we take the trouble to investigate, we shall find that the men who exerted the greatest sway over the masses and the multitude as orators, lawyers, preachers, and in other public capacities, were men who used very simple language. Daniel Webster was among the greatest orators this country has produced. He touched the hearts of senates and assemblages, of men and women, with the burning eloquence of his words. He never used a long word when he could convey the same or nearly the same meaning with a short one. When he made a speech, he always told those who put it in form for the press to strike out every long word. Study his speeches, go over all he ever said or wrote, and you will find that his language was always made up of short, clear, strong terms, although at times, for the sake of sound and oratorical effect, he was compelled to use a rather long word, but it was always against his inclination to do so, and where was the man who could paint with words as Webster painted? He could picture things in a way so clear that those who heard him felt that they had seen that of which he spoke. Abraham Lincoln was another who stirred the souls of men, yet he was not an orator, not a scholar. He did not write M.A. or Ph.D. after his name, or any other college degree, for he had none. He graduated from the University of Hard Knocks, and he never forgot this severe alma mater when he became President of the United States. He was just as plain, just as humble, as in the days when he split rails or plied a boat on the Sangamon. He did not use big words, but he used the words of the people, and in such a way as to make them beautiful. His Gettysburg Address is an English classic, one of the great masterpieces of the language. From the mere fact that a word is short, it does not follow that it is always clear. But it is true that nearly all clear words are short, and that most of the long words, especially those which we get from other languages, are misunderstood to a great extent by the ordinary rank and file of the people. Indeed, it is to be doubted if some of the scholars using them fully understand their import on occasions. A great many such words admit of several interpretations. A word has to be in use a great deal before people get thoroughly familiar with its meaning. Long words not alone obscure thought and make the ideas hazy, but at times they tend to mix up things in such a way that positively harmful results follow from their use. For instance, crime can be so covered with the folds of long words as to give it a different appearance. Even the hideousness of sin can be cloaked with such words until its outlines look like a thing of beauty. When a bank cashier makes off with $100,000, we politely term his crime defalcation instead of plain theft, and instead of calling himself a thief, we grandiosely allude to him as a defaulter. When we see a wealthy man staggering along a fashionable thoroughfare under the influence of alcohol, waving his arms in the air and shouting boisterously, we smile and say, "Poor gentleman, he is somewhat exhilarated," or at worst we say, "He is slightly inebriated." But when we see a poor man who has fallen from grace by putting an enemy into his mouth to steal away his brain, we express our indignation in the simple language of the words, "Look at the wretch, he is dead drunk." When we find a person in downright lying, we cover the falsehood with the finely spun cloak of the word prevarication. Shakespeare says, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet," and by a similar sequence a lie, no matter by what name you may call it, is always a lie and should be condemned. Then why not simply call it a lie? Mean what you say and say what you mean. Call a spade, It is the best term you can apply to the implement. When you try to use short words and shun long ones, in a little while you will find that you can do so with ease. A farmer was showing a horse to a city-bred gentleman. The animal was led into a paddock in which an old sow-pig was rooting. "What a fine quadruped!" exclaimed the city man. "Which of the two do you mean, the pig or the horse?" queried the farmer, "for in my opinion both of them are fine quadrupeds." Of course the visitor meant the horse, so it would have been much better had he called the animal by its simple, ordinary name. There would have been no room for ambiguity in his remark. He profited, however, by the incident, and never called a horse a quadruped again. Most of the small words, the simple words, the beautiful words which express so much within small bounds, belong to the pure Anglo-Saxon element of our language. This element has given names to the heavenly bodies, the sun, moon, and stars, to 3 out of the 4 elements, earth, fire, and water, 3 out of the 4 seasons, spring, summer, and winter. Its simple words are applied to all the natural divisions of time, except one, as day, night, morning, evening, twilight, noon, midday, midnight, sunrise, and sunset. The names of light, heat, cold, frost, rain, snow, hail, sleet, thunder, lightning, as well as almost all those objects which form the component parts of the beautiful, as expressed in external scenery, such as sea and land, hill and dale, wood and stream, etc., are Anglo-Saxon. To this same language we are indebted for those words which express the earliest and dearest connections, and the strongest and most powerful feelings of nature, and which, as a consequence, are interwoven with the fondest and most hallowed associations. Of such words are father, mother, husband, wife, brother, sister, son, daughter, child, home, kindred, friend, hearth, roof, and fireside. The chief emotions of which we are susceptible are expressed in the same language: love, hope, fear, sorrow, shame, and also the outward signs by which these emotions are indicated, as tear, smile, laugh, blush, weep, sigh, groan. Nearly all our national proverbs are Anglo-Saxon. Almost all the terms and phrases by which we most energetically express anger, contempt, and indignation are of the same origin. What are known as the smart set and so-called polite society are relegating a great many of our old Anglo-Saxon words into the shade, faithful friends who served their ancestors well. These self-appointed arbiters of diction regard some of the Anglo-Saxon words as too coarse, too plebeian for their aesthetic tastes and refined ears, so they are eliminating them from their vocabulary and replacing them with mongrels of foreign birth and hybrids of unknown origin. For the ordinary people, however, the man in the street or in the field, the woman in the kitchen or in the factory, they are still tried and true and, like old friends, should be cherished and preferred to all strangers, no matter from what source the latter may spring. End of chapter 13. Read by Kara Schallenberg. www.kray.org on November 10th, 2006 in Oceanside, California.
Chapter 14, The English Language. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 14, The English Language. Beginning, Different Sources, the Present. The English language is the tongue now current in England and her colonies throughout the world, and also throughout the greater part of the United States of America. It sprang from the German tongue spoken by the Teutons, who came over to Britain after the conquest of that country by the Romans. These Teutons comprised Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and several other tribes from the northern part of Germany. They spoke different dialects, but these became blended in the new country, and the composite tongue came to be known as the Anglo-Saxon, which has been the main basis for the language as at present constituted, and is still the prevailing element. Therefore, those who are trying to do away with some of the purely Anglo-Saxon words on the ground that they are not refined enough to express their aesthetic ideas are undermining main props which are necessary for the support of some important parts in the edifice of the language. The Anglo-Saxon element supplies the essential parts of speech: the article, pronoun of all kinds, the preposition, the auxiliary verbs, the conjunctions, and the little particles which bind words into sentences and form the joints, sinews, and ligaments of the language. It furnishes the most indispensable words of the vocabulary. Nowhere is the beauty of Anglo-Saxon better illustrated than in the Lord's Prayer. 54 words are pure Saxon, and the remaining ones could easily be replaced by Saxon words. The Gospel of St. John is another illustration of the almost exclusive use of Anglo-Saxon words. Shakespeare, at his best, is Anglo-Saxon. Here is a quotation from the Merchant of Venice, and of the 55 words, 52 are Anglo-Saxon, the remaining 3 French. All that glitters is not gold. Often have you heard that told? Many a man his life hath sold, but my outside to behold. Gilded tombs do worms enfold. Had you been as wise as bold, young in limbs, in judgment old, your answer had not been enscrolled. Fare you well, your suit is cold. The lines put into the mouth of Hamlet's father in fierce intenseness, second only to Dante's inscription on the gate of hell, have 108 Anglo-Saxon and but 15 Latin words. The second constituent element of present English is Latin, which comprises those words derived directly from the Old Roman and those which came indirectly through the French. The former were introduced by the Roman Christians who came to England at the close of the 6th century under Augustine, and relate chiefly to ecclesiastical affairs, such as saint from sanctus, religion from religio, chalice from calix, mass from missa, etc. Some of them had origin in Greek, as priest from presbyter, which in turn was a direct derivative from the Greek presbyteros, also deacon from the Greek diakonos. The largest class of Latin words are those which came through the Norman French, or Romance. The Normans had adopted, with the Christian religion, the language, laws, and arts of the Romanized Gauls and Romanized Franks, and, after a residence of more than a century in France, they successfully invaded England in 1066, under William the Conqueror, and a new era began. The French Latinisms can be distinguished by the spelling. Thus, Saviour comes from the Latin salvator, through the French sauveur; judgment from the Latin judiclum, through the French jugement; people from the Latin populus, through the French peuple, etc. For a long time the Saxon and Norman tongues refused to coalesce, and were like two distinct currents flowing in different directions. Norman was spoken by the lords and barons in their feudal castles, in Parliament, and in the courts of justice; Saxon by the people in their rural homes, fields, and workshops. For more than 300 years the streams flowed apart, but finally they blended, taking in the Celtic and Danish elements, and as a result came the English language with its simple system of grammatical inflection and its rich vocabulary. The father of English prose is generally regarded as Wycliffe, who translated the Bible in 1380, while the paternal laurels in the secular poetical field are twined around the brows of Chaucer. Besides the Germanic and Romanic, which constitute the greater part of the English language, many other tongues have furnished their quota. Of these, the Celtic is perhaps the oldest. The Britons at Caesar's invasion were a part of the Celtic family. The Celtic idiom is still spoken in two dialects, the Welsh in Wales and the Gaelic in Ireland and the Highlands of Scotland. The Celtic words in English are comparatively few. Cart, dock, wire, rail, rug, cradle, babe, groan, griddle, lad, lass are some in most common use. The Danish element dates from the piratical invasions of the 9th and 10th centuries. It includes anger, awe, baffle, bang, bark, ball, blunder, boulder, box, club, crash, dairy, dazzle, fellow, gable, gain, ill, jam, kidnap, kill, kidney, kneel, limber, litter, dog, lull, lump, mast, mistake, nag, nasty, niggard, horse, plow, rug, rump, sail, scald, shriek, skin, skull, sledge, sleigh, tackle, tangle, tipple, trust, Viking, window, wing, etc. From the Hebrew we have a large number of proper names from Adam and Eve down to John and Mary, and such words as Messiah, Rabbi, Hallelujah, Cherub, Seraph, Hosanna, Manna, Satan, Sabbath, etc. Many technical terms and names of branches of learning come from the Greek. In fact, nearly all the terms of learning and art, from the alphabet to the highest peaks of metaphysics and theology, come directly from the Greek. Philosophy, logic, anthropology, psychology, aesthetics, grammar, rhetoric, history, philology, mathematics, arithmetic, astronomy, anatomy, geography, stenography, physiology, architecture, and hundreds more in similar domains. The subdivisions and ramifications of theology as exegesis, hermeneutics, apologetics, polemics, dogmatics, ethics, homiletics, etc. are all Greek. The Dutch have given us some modern sea terms, as sloop, schooner, yacht, and also a number of others as boom, bush, boor, brandy, duck, reef, skate, wagon. The Dutch of Manhattan gave us boss, the name for employer or overseer, also cold slaw, cut cabbage and vinegar, and a number of geographical terms. Many of our most pleasing euphonic words, especially in the realm of music, have been given to us directly from the Italian. Of these are piano, violin, orchestra, canto, allegro, piazza, gazette, umbrella, gondola, bandit, etc. Spanish has furnished us with alligator, alpaca, bigot, cannibal, cargo, filibuster, freebooter, guano, hurricane, mosquito, negro, stampede, potato, tobacco, tomato, tariff, etc. From Arabic we have several mathematical, astronomical, medical, and chemical terms as alcohol, alcove, alembic, algebra, alkali, almanac, assassin, azure, cipher, elixir, harem, hijira, sofa, talisman, zenith, and zero. Bazaar, dervish, lilac, pagoda, caravan, scarlet, shawl, tartar, tiara, and peach have come to us from the Persian. Turban, tulip, divan, and firman are Turkish. Drosky, knout, ruble, steppe, ukazi are Russian. The Indians have helped us considerably, and the words they have given us are extremely euphonic, as exemplified in the names of many of our rivers and states, as Mississippi, Missouri, Minnehaha, Susquehanna, Monongahela, Niagara, Ohio, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Iowa, Nebraska, Dakota, etc. In addition to these proper names, we have from the Indians wigwam, squaw, hammock, tomahawk, canoe, moccasin, hominy, etc. There are many hybrid words in English, that is, words springing from two or more different languages. In fact, English has drawn from all sources, and it is daily adding to its already large family, and not alone is it adding to itself, but it is spreading all over the world, and promises to take in the entire human family beneath its folds ere long. It is the opinion of many that English, in a short time, will become the universal language. It is now being taught as a branch of the higher education in the best colleges and universities in Europe, and in all commercial cities in every land throughout the world. In Asia it follows the British sway and the highways of commerce through the vast empire of East India, with its 250 millions of heathen and Mohammedan inhabitants. It is largely used in the seaports of Japan and China, and the number of natives of these countries who are learning it is increasing every day. It is firmly established in South Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and in many of the islands of the Indian and South Seas. It is the language of Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, and Christian missionaries are introducing it into all the islands of Polynesia. It may be said to be the living commercial language of the North American continent, from Baffin's Bay to the Gulf of Mexico, and from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and it is spoken largely in many of the republics of South America. It is not limited by parallels of latitude or meridians of longitude. The two great English-speaking countries, England and the United States, are disseminating it north, south, east, and west over the entire world. End of chapter 14. Read by Dennis Sayers in Modesto, California for LibriVox, Winter 2007.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin. Chapter 15. Masters and Masterpieces of Literature. Great Authors, Classification, and the World's Best Books. The Bible is the world's greatest book. Apart from its character as a work of divine revelation, it is the most perfect literature extant. Leaving out the Bible, the three greatest works are those of Homer, Dante, and Shakespeare. These are closely followed by the works of Virgil and Milton. Indispensable books: Homer, Dante, Cervantes, Shakespeare, and Goethe. The best translation of Homer for the ordinary reader is by Chapman. Norton's translation of Dante and Taylor's translation of Goethe's Faust are recommended. A good library. Besides the works mentioned, everyone should endeavour to have the following: Plutarch's Lives, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Chaucer, Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, Holy Living and Holy Dying by Jeremy Taylor, Pilgrim's Progress, Macaulay's Essays, Bacon's Essays, Addison's Essays, Essays of Elia or Charles Lamb, Les Miserables by Hugo, Heroes and Hero Worship by Carlyle, Palgrave's Golden Treasury, Wordsworth, The Vicar of Wakefield, Adam Bede by George Eliot, Vanity Fair by Thackeray, Ivanhoe by Scott, On the Heights by Auerbach, Eugénie Grandet by Balzac, The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne, Emerson's Essays, Boswell's Life of Johnson, History of the English People by Green, Outlines of Universal History, The Origin of Species, Montaigne's Essays, Longfellow, Tennyson, Browning, Whittier, Ruskin, and Herbert Spencer. A good encyclopedia is very desirable, and a reliable dictionary indispensable. Masterpieces of American Literature. The Scarlet Letter, Parkman's Histories, Motley's Dutch Republic, Grant's Memoirs, Franklin's Autobiography, Webster's Speeches, Lowell's Bigelow Papers, also his critical essays, Thoreau's Walden, Leaves of Grass by Whitman, Leatherstocking Tales by Cooper, Autocrat of the Breakfast Table, Ben-Hur, and Uncle Tom's Cabin. The 10 Greatest American Poets. Bryant, Poe, Whittier, Longfellow, Lowell, Emerson, Whitman, Lanier, Aldrich, and Stoddard. The 10 Greatest English Poets. Chaucer, Spenser, Shakespeare, Milton, Burns, Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley, Tennyson, and Browning. The 10 Greatest English Essayists. Bacon, Addison, Steele, Macaulay, Lamb, Jeffrey, De Quincey, Carlyle, Thackeray, and Matthew Arnold. The best plays of Shakespeare, in order of merit, are Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, Antony and Cleopatra, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, Henry IV, As You Like It, Winter's Tale, Romeo and Juliet, The Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, and The Tempest. Only the good. If you are not able to procure a library of the great masterpieces, get at least a few. Read them carefully, intelligently, and with a view to enlarging your own literary horizon. Remember, a good book cannot be read too often. One of a deteriorating influence should not be read at all. In literature, as in all things else, the good alone should prevail. End of chapter 15. End of How to Speak and Write Correctly by Joseph Devlin.